Thank you for being here. I'm just truly honored. Hopefully, you remember we met 15 years ago when you were just starting off with your speaking career. And, we worked together at Anomaly and a
Right.
few other places. But incredibly honored to have you here. Folks, get your questions ready. If you ever go to a party and Eric's there, he's the most interesting guy in the room. I'm telling you right away. I want to give people some background on who you are. I'm sure you've told this story a million times by now, but for folks that don't know, Eric is the guy who caught our most notorious spy in US history. We got a lot to cover here, Eric, but let's give people that foundation of like, what is this incredible story that even Hollywood needed to document for you?
Sure. Well, my claim to fame, my background that really matters to people is in the FBI. I worked in counterintelligence and counterterrorism. And near the end of my career, I was assigned to the most unique case the FBI has arguably ever run to go undercover in FBI headquarters to catch a decorated 25-year veteran supervisory special agent named Robert Hansen, who was also the most damaging spy in the FBI's history and quite possibly US history. For 22 years of his 25-year career, he stole some of the most damaging secrets from the United States intelligence and handed them right over to the Soviet Union and then Russia. I mean, he spied so long, his career was so long that he began spying for the Soviets, and we caught him as he was spying for the Russian Federation. And during that time, he was never caught. And the reason was he was not only one of the most damaging spies, but our first cyber spy. He was able to steal information from computer systems in the FBI that were never built to defend from a trusted insider, somebody already within the circle of trust. He's very clever in how he stole that information. He would get on task forces with other agencies and steal from them. And that way, when our spies over in Russia were receiving the information and reporting back, they didn't know whether this incredible legendary spy that we only knew by the code name Gray Suit was in the FBI or CIA or NSA or where. So it was a perfect cover for him. And he was able to do this for decades and undermine US counterintelligence. He gave up secrets regarding our nuclear weapons program. He destroyed undercover operations. He blew the cover from countless undercover operatives. And between 84 and 85, we lost every single asset in Russia. We were completely blind in terms of espionage.
It's a really remarkable story. I highly recommend folks watch the movie. It's called Breach. Read Eric's book. Not only has he got this incredible story, he's an incredible writer. It's a total page turner. It's all completely true. It is an amazing read. It sort of blows your mind. And part of what I found so shocking was, Eric, the missed signals, right? The opportunities to have discovered him, or even the like implied trust, right? Like we don't investigate our own, or
Right.
not sharing information amongst the agencies. I mean, this is 2000, and a lot of what you talk about is how low tech our security infrastructure was at the time.
Well, one of the big problems is bias. And if you're an investigator, which is if someone really wanted to say, Eric, you do all these things, you run companies, you were in the FBI, you're an expert in cybersecurity, you're an attorney, like what, you're an author, what are you really? A public speaker? I would say I'm an investigator. And the key component you need to be a incredible investigator, whether you're investigating spies or terrorists, like what I did in the FBI, or you are working for an organization and you are investigating to try to find a breach or a cyber criminal who's trying to get access to your data. You can't have bias. You have to go into every investigation clean and just follow the facts wherever they are. If you bring any of your personal bias into any investigation, then you corrupt it. You'll find the way to make someone guilty. You will lose the trail of the actual person that you're trying to pursue. They never believed that it could be one of us. It had to be someone else. They were looking very heavily at the CIA and NSA and everywhere else, but internally. And you always have to look internally because that's where you might find the spy.
Well, and there was an information sharing problem as well, or friction, right? It was like, it's not us, it's them. And they were probably thinking the same exact thing. And this flow of data and knowledge was just not there.
That's certainly true. For most of Hansen's career, the FBI was very opposed to other intelligence agencies and it wasn't sharing information. But in fact, the reason that we caught Hansen, the reason we even learned about him was because the FBI and CIA finally got together and formed a joint task force and went out and let it be known that we were looking for information that could lead to this legendary spy gray suit. Uh, and if you're wondering why my book's Gray Day, that was the code name that was given to Robert Hansen, who might be Gray Suit, right? It's always a derivative code name. And that joint task force was able to recruit a former KGB intelligence officer who had a slim file of information that was enough for us to build the case. And then, of course, they needed someone to go undercover in that office to develop the information to find out that smoking gun that was going to lead to his arrest. And that ended up being me.
Well, it's a kind of crazy thing, like, you went undercover, right?
Right.
Like, the FBI is already an undercover, but you're typically investigating, drug dealers or kingpins or state actors or whatever, but you went undercover inside the FBI.
I went undercover. So I was playing a role, but still being me. Obviously, they couldn't send me into the FBI with what we call a legend, a different name, background, etc. Because someone sees me in the hall and says, "Hey, Eric," then the whole thing's blown.
You find the
The
spy
other thing was uh, one of the problems the FBI had is they didn't have a specifically trained agent who could go into this office with Hansen and sell the fact that what Hansen was put in charge of in the FBI in order to bring him back to FBI headquarters was building cybersecurity for the FBI. And I just happened to be someone who knew how to hunt a spy and turn a computer on. So it took a hacker to catch a hacker. And that was really the foundation of my beginning in cybersecurity, was going after the most damaging spy in espionage in our history.
Well, it seems like from reading Gray Day, right? Like, tell me if I'm wrong here, but part of what made you the ideal guy was I think you were pretty brand new at the FBI, like a few years out of Quantico, and you had some tech computer chops, right? And so
Yeah, I was a 5-year veteran undercover
so
asset. Normally, people who did what I did only last about 2 years before they burn out. So I was a little bit crazy, which I think you need to go undercover to catch somebody like Hansen. And I was trained to pursue a target, what we call ghosting a target. In fact, my squad was called the Ghosts. I was known by a code name. I didn't really have much of an identity within the FBI. Senior agents once told me, like, if I turn around on the street and I see you following me, I know my career is over. What made me uniquely qualified is I was also one of those hackers in the 80s. I'm aging myself here, but I was fascinated with breaking computer systems in order to protect them, to build security better. And back then, all you young folk won't remember that, if you wanted to play a video game back in the 80s, when you were just swapping floppy disks to make it keep going, you had to be a little bit of a programmer or it wouldn't run. There were no patches you could download or things like that. You go to your local computer store and talk to that geek, and he'd give you lines of code that worked and you test them out. And so you learn to code. And, Hansen was exactly the same way. And so, like I said, took a hacker to catch a hacker. You just needed a
well,
good.
yeah, indeed. And, we sort of assume that the FBI have the best technologies, but frankly, back in 99, 2000, when you were doing this, 2001, just wasn't the case over at the FBI. It was pretty low tech.
Now, the FBI was really on their computerization goal. There were still agents who were typing things on manual typewriters in 2000, 2001. In the movie Breach, to show this transition, we have scenes where, as you're walking down the hall toward our office, there are just crates of new computers that are going to be deployed into offices, and personnel would be trained. And that was exactly true. It was a little bizarre for me, especially because I was in law school. I was at that point using Westlaw and Lexis and thinking, we don't have a database that's this good. Why don't we go out in the civilian world and have them develop it for us? We're still doing a lot of target analytical work by just throwing a lot of paper on a big table and sorting it, which boggles the mind. It's obviously completely different now. The FBI is one of the premier agencies in tracking down cybercrime and cyber espionage and defending against nation state attacks against our critical infrastructure. The IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center, is one of the most extraordinary places that you can lodge a complaint. It collects incredible data about the state of cybercrime here in the United States and across the globe. So they've certainly changed their tune since way back when they struggled to find a spy hunter who could turn on a computer.
Well, indeed. And we actually did a webinar about a year ago with the FBI, the cybercrime office here in San Francisco. And it was probably one of our most highly attended sessions. It was really fascinating at just how accessible the FBI actually is. The whole session was about what do you do if you've been breached or you're
Right.
the target of a crime? And the IC3 you mentioned reminded me of that. Like it's actually an incredibly accessible organization.
Yes. For my new book, Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime, I leaned heavily on the IC3 for some of the best statistics to demonstrate how cybercrime is growing in particular, especially in particular areas. And cybercrime, it's fascinating if you look at it, it grows based on the targets. So, for example, during the pandemic, we saw an immense amount of romance fraud where someone uses this fake profile and then gets someone to fall in love with them, and it's completely online, and then they defraud them out of a tons of money. And why? Because we were lonely. We're stuck in our homes. And as soon as the pandemic ended and we're back out on the streets, cybercrime moved to primarily financial cryptocurrency pig butchering fraud, where, and this is on an individual basis, of course, where that friendship isn't romance. Now it's just friendship. And hey, I have this great investment opportunity for you, and defrauding people of billions of dollars there. Ransomware has seen this uptick and then a downtipping, and now it's up again as organizations aren't taking the step that they need to protect themselves, nor are individuals. And it's led to these massive cybercrime gangs. I mean, the new mafia is now in the dark web, hidden and all over the world, launching attacks that make far more money than any of the traditional crime that we grew up learning about, and bank robbers. Um,
Yeah.
it's a serious problem.
No, no doubt about it. And so let's pivot a little bit, right? So you've got a new book. It's coming out October, I believe, and you can see the picture of it here. Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. We've got the scrolling thing. A lot of people asking, is it coming out on Audible? Just give us a little bit of background on the book, please.
Sure. It is coming out on Audible. If you like my voice, I sat
I,
and recorded it over 3 days. I also do the narration for Gray Day. A lot of the book is in first person. In fact, I take you through, I was in the middle of a ransomware attack for an organization from start to finish, how we handled that. The idea for the book is to explain cybercrime and have you think like a spy. So what I do is I break down all of the ways that traditional espionage are being used by cyber criminals in order to deceive us into just handing over the keys to our data. And then the second half of the book flips the script, and I teach you how to act like a spy hunter. And these give you the tools to defend against these attacks, with the idea that if kind of like what you're doing in learning and knowledge, if you can recognize the threat and the attack, you won't be deceived and fooled into being defrauded, attacked, locked with ransomware, or breached. But you also have to know how to defend against it, what steps you can take once you recognize the cyber criminal. That's what the book does. And it does it all through storytelling. I'm a public speaker first, and I believe when I get on stage and I do any keynote about cybersecurity, it has to be through storytelling, because stories are the way that we remember. And if I can teach you through stories, you'll remember. And when you see that attack, you'll remember the story, and they're not going to catch you.
well, we used to do these workshops where we would go through the OWASP top 10, and it was literally like, okay, this is OWASP number one, blah, 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 blah. Here's OWASP two, blah, 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 blah. And then we flipped it and we were like, let me tell you what happened to XYZ company.
Exactly.
That's OWASP one. And that made it so much more entertaining and memorable. Now, I want folks to know that we're going to be giving away a bunch of copies of Eric's book. I think about 25 copies here, right? But here's how you can enter, right? So Christine, can we update the scrolling thing here? So Eric, you've got a newsletter. I've been a subscriber of your newsletter for as long as it's been out, as far as I know. It is one of those newsletters I read every time it comes out. It's not one of those things like, oh, archive, delete. You put a lot of effort into this newsletter. There's no question
Thank you,
about it.
Dan.
You're an incredible writer, right? Not to, like, aside from all the expertise and incredible background you got, you tell stories in your newsletters, right? And you always have a breach of the week, some sort of interesting tidbit. Tell us about your newsletter. And for everyone who's interested in the book, this is how you can enter to win one. But aside from the book, sign up for this newsletter. There's a little link that's scrolling across the top, or go to ericoneal.net. I'm sure it can be found there as well. Christine's just put it into the chat. This is one hell of a newsletter. I highly recommend it.
Well, thank you, Dan. The newsletter is a companion to the book. Here's the thing about a book. I wrote the book and I'm being published by HarperCollins, and it was locked. cybersecurity doesn't stop and cybercrime doesn't stop. And so there's so many new attacks and new breaches that I want to talk about. That's both the name of the newsletter and the name of the book is Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime is what I talk about every single week in that newsletter. And those are the stories that you'll see in the book. Now, the book is like your field manual to protecting yourself against this
Hmm.
growing threat of cybercrime. One statistic that still makes me nervous today is that cybercrime by next year will surpass $20 trillion, which makes it easily the third largest economy on earth and quite possibly the second if China keeps going down and cybercrime keeps going up. That's
So,
what we're up against. The
uh,
newsletter tells unique stories every week about what you need to know and what's top of my mind in this world. So it prepares you to defend against these attacks. So what I'm doing in the book gives you that basis, and then the newsletter keeps everything current so that you can continue this journey of protecting yourself.
yeah, I see people are signing up. People sign up. Make sure you're following Eric. I follow you on LinkedIn. I love your posts. They're always so very thoughtful and interesting and entertaining. I remember the ones when you were recording your Audible and how you kept your voice from just going completely hoarse. So you share a lot of yourself, your life. So let's pivot again. You had this incredible experience catching the most notorious spy in US history. There's this, oh, hey, Ewan, I think you got on, someone brought you on. Hey, we'll
Hey
join
there.
you in a minute. Let me take you off the screen here. So you had this, did it, first of all, did catching Hansen kill your FBI career?
It didn't. And here's why. Hansen was caught because I was able to find the smoking gun. Those of you who are Gen X or older will know what a Palm Pilot is. It's actually right there. That's the one that Chris Cooper used in the movie Breach. And I was able to steal it from Hansen. And like a great Bond villain, he had the information we needed to know when he'd make his final drop to the Russians in that Palm Pilot. There's a great scene in the movie Breach where Ryan Phillippe, actually, when I was sitting there watching it be filmed, I had PTSD just watching him reenact it. And then I tell the story in my book, Gray Day, from behind my eyes of how I was able to get it back just before Hansen returned to the office, and he probably would have
I
shot me if
gotta,
I had failed.
I gotta ask. That wasn't Hollywood. That wasn't some embellishment of like,
No,
"Oh, we gotta, like, make this more suspenseful." Like, folks, this scene where Eric has to steal the pump, I'm not gonna spoil it too much because you should go watch it. It is unbelievable. You're telling me that's all true?
that is absolutely all true. Yeah. Sometimes you have to explain your mistakes. I wasn't sure which pocket I'd stolen it from. And I only had moments to decide before he came into the office, and I managed to get it right, which led to his arrest. And those moments kind of opened the door to a future. Now, Hansen never knew that I was the one who found the information that led to his arrest. In fact, I asked to see Hansen. I just needed that moment, right? That final moment of closure. Here was the quote from the FBI. We're afraid that if he learns that it was you who betrayed him, because you've done such a good job at gaining his trust, that he will, here's the quote, rattle the bars of his cage, lawyer up, and won't sign the plea deal that we have ready
Mhm.
for him. So they didn't allow me to meet with them. And then I later left the FBI. If you look at the original affidavit that was published by the FBI for his arrest, I'm not mentioned in it because I was still a top secret undercover asset for the FBI. When they're talking about me, they say, and other ways and means.
No
That's
kidding.
me in that document.
Well, and Robert Hansen passed away about a year ago, spending literally the following 25 years, not just in prison, but in solitary, if I'm not mistaken.
In Supermax Prison, Florence, Colorado, one of the top 10 worst prisons to be incarcerated in on earth. So he certainly did not have a happy rest of his life.
And he was still dangerous even in prison, right? So he still had in his head all these secrets,
Right.
the ability to mingle with Gen Pop, I guess, if I've watched enough prison movies. But so he never knew it was you.
Oh, he certainly learned later. I mean, a major public speaking career over the past
Ah,
25 some years, wrote a book about it. I'm sure someone handed him a paperback. He could read paperbacks. I tried
ah,
to get one sent to him, but you are not able to send anything to that prison. It's not allowed. And, he had a black and white TV and he could only watch the news. I was all over the news after
yeah.
that. And I'm like, hey, look, I'm still on the news a lot. So he certainly would have known. I tried desperately to get in there to have one final conversation with him. I actually wanted to make it the last chapter of my book, Gray Day, but I
Yeah.
just couldn't get through the morass of,
Approval.
administration and bureaucracy to get in front of him.
So since 2001, right? Eventually you left the FBI and you've dedicated yourself to cybersecurity.
Yes.
So from catching spies in the physical world to catching spies in the cyber world. So what was that transition? And what are the kinds of things that you work on these days? I mean, I know you do speaking, but you also work with organizations, you advise. Like, what was that pivot into cybersecurity like?
Certainly. My pivot began really as a public speaker. I transitioned from the inspirational story of catching Robert Hansen to what you need to know in the world of cybersecurity and cybercrime. Turns out that when you're a storyteller, you become in demand as a cybersecurity speaker because most cybersecurity speakers are just not that great at telling a story. I found a niche and leveraged that into a company called Nexusure. And I have a company that I've had for years called the Georgetown Group that does competitive intelligence. Nexusure does cybersecurity advisory. I've been for the last decade plus a national security strategist for various cybersecurity companies. And the idea being that I bring the science of counterintelligence to cybersecurity. My big theory that has proven true again and again and again that I first promoted in Gray Day is that there are no hackers, there are only spies, that hacking is nothing more than the necessary evolution of cyber espionage. See, what happened is all of the cyber criminals and cyber spies are using traditional espionage techniques in a modern era. They're using computer systems not to attack computer systems, but to attack you and me. And they're using deception, impersonation, confidence schemes. They're fooling us in order to get us to hand over the keys to their data. My good friend and the late great Kevin Mitnick used to call this social engineering. And that's what's happening. Social engineering is just spycraft. It's using a little bit of trust and a lot of deception to get you to believe something that's not true. And that's how the majority of cyber attacks happen.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, what I'm hearing is you've translated, and I think your book that's coming out, which I'll certainly read as soon as it's out, these spy craft techniques and knowledge, awareness, expertise are directly applicable to the cybersecurity world.
Yes, they are. I call it DICED. I have two acronyms in the book, two methods. One is DICED, which is deception, impersonation, infiltration, confidence schemes, exploitation, and destruction. Seven of the core espionage principles that cyber criminals are leveraging and learning in order to breach us. And then paid, prepare, assess, investigate, decide. That's how you can act like a spy hunter to defend against those seven deadly ways that cyber criminals are coming after us. And I really do focus this book, although there's cyber espionage in it, I focus the book on cybercrime because for you and me and most organizations, it's not as much Russia and China and Iran and North Korea, although you have to worry about foreign intelligence services as well, especially in critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
But it's cybercrime that we have to worry about because that's how fortunes are made on the dark web. I even go over the shoulder of a good friend of mine who is what I call a dark web spelunker. He goes all the way down deep into those caverns of the dark web. And I have him take me down as deep as you can go into some of the most depraved, horrible marketplaces on earth so I can show my readers exactly what the dark web is, what's for sale there, and how dangerous it is for someone who is not initiated and understands how to protect themselves when going down there.
Well, we talk a lot about APIs, application security, and so forth. And a lot of the examples that we highlight is how APIs, which are this like pipe right into the innards of your organization. When you log in, that's an API call. When I transfer money, different API call. When I want to register or look up a resource or an asset, whatever, that's all API calls. And these APIs are kind of the front door or the toll booth or whatever you want to call it. And there are countless examples where these APIs are not properly controlled and authenticated and authorized, and it results in harvesting of data,
Yes.
right? API breaches tend to involve millions of records, although I'm sure there are plenty of others that are more targeted and all that. But like, you know, tens, hundreds of millions of records that then end up for sale on the dark web, right? And so as we wrap up here, I think about you, like you think about at the state level, the nation, global, like all that, but then we have people here who are like trying to protect themselves, protect their companies. Are these just two different worlds or do they actually touch each other at some point?
Intersects. You Cyber attackers, right? And especially when we're talking about cyber criminals, they don't care who you are and they don't care how much money you have. They don't care what you do, how prominent you are, how important you are. The only thing they care about is whether you're vulnerable because they don't win unless they breach you. Spies are targeted. They will come after you and they will find a way in. And so you have to defend. And when we're talking about APIs, when we're talking about connecting your data outside of your organization in any way, shape, or form, what I like to say is none of us live on a digital island. And we're really only as secure as that other organization or other connection that has a way into our data, because that's the tunnel that attackers will use. I mean, just look at that old Target breach. That massive breach of their point of sale devices was all traced back to one node that they had opened in their network
Yeah.
for a HVAC company, just so that they could log in on the morning and set their temperature of the Target stores
That
to
was
a comfortable temperature, and then at night not waste air conditioning and heat. So you have to be very careful in cybersecurity about any different connection to that data that has now become the currency of our lives. Because if you're not, the spies and the cyber criminals will find a way in.
well, on that note, what a perfect place to pause here. Eric, thank you so much for being here. It's gonna be an amazing thing. Just learning about what the book is all about, right?
Absolutely. If you want to
Really
learn about critical infrastructure attacks, about what's going to happen with quantum supremacy and computing to all of our data and encryption, there is a chapter that I think that every single parent should read with their teenager about exploitation and how the internet is changing our future generation. So there's a lot in that for everyone out there. And I think I'm hoping it will be a very important book for our society.
well, we are grateful for you to be here, grateful for you to write that book, and thanks so much, man. It's really an honor.
Yeah, Dan, it's good to be together with you again, my friend, and to join this great group. And I hope I've imparted a little bit of wisdom. And I'm here for everybody. You subscribe to my newsletter. You also have access to me. There is a very healthy debate there, and I'm pretty good about answering questions.